Mackenzie, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it. How are you? How
Yeah.
have you been since the show?
I am incredible. I'm so excited to be here. This is actually my first podcast, so
Wow.
I am ready to speak my truth.
Well, I'm sure you're going to have a lot more podcast requests along the way. So yeah, it's nice to be your first one though. So that's good. Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully that's the goal. I want to get out as much as possible. There's so much behind the scenes stuff, so it's always cool to
Mm,
be able to, get a platform to
yeah.
talk about that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, going back though, what was your motivation for joining? Like, what inspired you to join Squid Game? I know it's the money probably, but yeah, like, what was the audition process like for you as well?
Yeah, so I went into it. I kind of have a funny story. So I was watching season one of Squid Game, the challenge, after watching the scripted series and ended up watching it with my ex. And we got to the end and there was a QR code. I made a little joke about, oh, I want to do that so bad. Me and my brother had always talked about going on Survivor. And he kind of made a joke and he was like, you wouldn't last 5 minutes in there because I'm a little bit high maintenance, I have to admit. So when he said that, I was like, okay, let's see what we can do here. So I sent in a minute long video just kind of explaining, my life and what I do. And I didn't hear anything back from them for a really long time. So I actually forgot that I had
Mm,
applied. And then I got an email back and they were like, hey, we want to go through all of the steps, which it's kind of extensive. And I'm glad that it is.
mm,
But you have to go through medical checks and you have to fill out questionnaires and psych evaluations, like all kinds of things. So going through that process, it was slow. I heard nothing and then ended up, yeah, making it on the show, getting through all
mm.
the checks. And I was able to kind of stick it to my ex and be like, hey, I made it. I'm going to
Yeah.
London. So let's see how this goes.
Wow. What was the hardest part about the process of it all though? Because like you said, there was a lot of paperwork, so there must have been quite a lot. That was quite challenging to do to get in.
Yeah, I think that the hardest part is the waiting and hearing nothing because you don't
Mm,
really know if you should be planning, like if you plan trips, if you should be doing that.
mm,
Work is a big thing for a lot of people. They only get 2 weeks off usually. So I know that was probably hard, but hearing nothing and then having to kind of rush around to finish the checks and all of that, that was the hardest part.
mm.
A lot of it is just being yourself because if you're not, it shows through on camera big time. So
Yeah.
they don't want a character, they want who you actually are. So,
Yeah. Yeah. Were there a lot of people that you think that weren't themselves on the show? Like, yeah.
yeah, I think ultimately, people went in there with two goals. They
Mm,
either had the goal of getting screen time and exposure, or they had the goal of actually winning the money. Whether it was both, I don't really know, but people have surprised me off camera for sure. I knew going into it that there was going to be some people just looking for exposure, but
mm,
ultimately, at some point during the games, it becomes very real where you're like, I could win this money. So
mm.
it's cool to kind of see, people on and off camera. But
Yeah, yeah. Was your aim for exposure as well? Because I saw you had quite a large following on TikTok. I don't know if that came after the show or before, or just something you was originally good at. Yeah.
yeah, so I went in there very scared of people, very scared of the world. I grew my TikTok following after the show, which was kind of crazy. But I went in there. I'm from a really small town. I don't know a lot of people. I'm a real estate agent, so part of me was
Mhm,
kind of like, this could potentially build my business, but strategically, you don't necessarily want to be the loudest one in the room because then you're
mm.
kind of a target. So I forgot that I was on camera a lot of the time,
Yeah.
honestly.
Okay.
But my main goal was to win the money for sure.
Wow. Well, where about are you from? Just out of curiosity, is it? Did you say Michigan earlier or somewhere near there? Or something? Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yep. So I've lived in Michigan my entire life. I grew up just outside of Detroit and then I moved a little bit north. So now I'm in the middle of nowhere. I went from city to country pretty quick. But yeah, it's been good.
Wow. Wow. Have you been out to London before as well? What was that experience like for you as well?
Yeah, so I had never been out of the country at that point. I think I went on a cruise when I was like 15 during Christmas, and that was pretty much it. So leaving the country alone, I had never flown alone either, was scary. And when you land, you have some instructions, you get an email on where to go and all that. But going out of the country alone, as I think I was 24 at the time, I was just very
Okay.
scared and I knew what I was going into, but I didn't really get to explore London very much. I'm going to have to make my way back over there so that I can experience it outside of the
Yeah.
dormitory.
Well, it's a very inspiring story because like everyone has a different way into the show, and it's quite incredible to hear like different people's versions of it. So yeah, yeah. What was you most like nervous about at first? I know you said they're like you're shy of people as well, like large groups. I think that's what you said. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that the most terrifying part was you think you don't know exactly what you're getting yourself into. You can
Mm,
watch the show, but you know ultimately that there's a lot of things that happen outside of that. So going there and not having a connection from the outside world was scary. And being in the hotel without a phone, I think we were there for 3 days, 3 or 4 days, but you get in your head a lot and you kind of like marinate in your thoughts.
mm,
So the scariest part was just, am I actually going to get to London and then make it to film this show? And once all of that becomes real and you're like, okay, I'm not going to get kidnapped and my
mm,
family's not going to know about it, you start being more scared of, honestly, for me, it was talking to people because I went into it very thinking that I was going into my villain era and that I was not going to care about anyone and I was going to stick to myself and that was it. But
mm,
I really surprised myself in terms of being an empath and really caring about other people's stories. And overall, the most terrifying part was just the anxiety of,
mm.
am I going to get through this game or what's going to happen? So yeah, I think my own thoughts
Wow.
were the scariest part, honestly.
Yeah. No, of course, it's always that way. Did you ever do any, prep for the games before going in? Did you give yourself any practice, or did you just go in with the flow? Yeah.
So I went on Reddit a lot to try to figure out what people were thinking the games for season two of
Mm,
the Squid Game challenge were going to be. And so I got that information. But the biggest thing that I did to prep for that show was fast. So I wasn't eating breakfast. I wouldn't eat until very late in the day.
okay.
And tried to kind of get the time change involved in that because food is something that severely can affect you physically, emotionally, mentally, and I get hangry. So I was like, the
Mm,
last thing that I want to do is get hangry in the dormitory and end
yeah.
up shooting myself in the foot with other people just because I'm hungry. So that was the best prep, but I did practice gongi and I think that was pretty much it. I didn't really have a lot of time between finding out I was going and actually doing it. So I could have prepped better, but
Well,
definitely fasting is my number one recommendation.
yeah. I would say actually because I did get told it's quite limited with food as well, and there wasn't that much, choice that whole time. So yeah.
Yeah, the food, it wasn't the worst ever, but the breakfast, the porridge was disgusting.
Mm,
And I can eat pretty much anything but that porridge. People were finding plastic in it. They were finding hairs in their porridge, and
really?
it's already like yes, it's already a
Mm,
disgusting consistency. So it's like adding hair and plastic on top of that is crazy.
mm,
But I just wouldn't eat breakfast, and if the lunch was good, I would eat that, and the dinner, you need the energy, but yeah, we would get some little, we called them trauma bars. They're little
mm.
protein bars. Those were delicious. So anytime we got those, it was, sacred.
Wow, yeah, that's insane. I don't know if I could do it. I feel like I mean anything's possible, but it's like it's quite a challenge to sort of sacrifice the food, especially for me anyway. We all love food, don't we? So yeah,
And I'm a big snacker. So throughout the days, I was like, I just want a snack. And honestly, it ended up being a pretty large motivation for people. We had that vending machine in the boiler room on the show, and people could ultimately choose if they wanted to send someone home or get a snack at one point. So some people were choosing snacks and we were sharing them and stuff like that. So it ended up being a big piece of the
mm,
show. And I mean, even further on when the monitors were eating on the stage, they didn't really show, but they were eating breakfast, lunch, and dinner on the stage.
yeah,
So they didn't have to eat any of the crappy food at all. So that starts playing a mind game with you on if you want to, ask them to bring you up there with you or if it's going to end up being a trick or
mm,
yada yada. So the food was probably the biggest mind game that was going on the entire time there, I would say.
Wow, yeah, yeah, I'm sure. Moving on to the game side of it, which game made you most nervous when you were filming?
Ooh. So I think the first game, the voting, if we had to do
Mm,
X or O, it was just such a long day. And going into the dorm, a lot of people were feeling safe. They're like, hey, we're all sleeping here, but we weren't.
yeah,
And I counted all the beds and I was like, oh crap, like half of these people are going home and I don't want to be one of them. So having no control, I just sat in the back and I was quiet because I
wow,
knew that I'm not the best at counting. I don't do a job that involves a lot of, timing.
mm,
And I knew that I was just going to distract people. So going into that was hard. Mingle totally tricked me because the whole time everyone's like, we're going to play Mingle, we're going to play Mingle. I'm like, there is no way. That game is such an incredible liability. There's no way we're
mm,
going to play it. So going into the room, I was like, well, maybe this is going to be a variation of Mingle and it's not going to be like it was in the scripted series. But that was the game that ended up really freaking me out overall and really changing the way that I viewed people in the game. And it was definitely the most character
yeah.
building game that I played for sure.
Yeah, it sounded like you were quite under pressure and stressed a little bit in Mingle, to be fair. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that see, it's hard because we all go into this and we know that there's 456 people there. And if I
Mm,
had to sit on a show and watch 456 people tell their stories, it's like boring. Like you don't want to hear all of that or see really all of the friendships being built. But going into that, I had a very strong alliance. So you see a little clip of me crying and saying that's so mean about him calling
yeah.
Damien a Viking. But at that point, we had gone rounds and rounds in Mingle, and there's much more that Isaiah had said other than him calling him a Viking. So, and Claire was my friend in that room too, and she was friends with Damien. So when he went home, she was upset, everyone was upset, and you're in this little room where there's like no airflow, and it's like, what the hell? What do I even do right now? So it was
Mm,
pretty much word vomiting, but even after that had happened, I didn't know that people were nicknaming him the Viking. And yes, there were other things that were said, but after I was like, that was ignorant of me. I shouldn't have said that to you because I realized that I could have just blown up my entire alliance just
yeah.
by
Okay.
sticking up for someone. But yeah, that game overall, it was just they tried to pull us in the middle and have us eat dinner, and we were like, guys, we're on a spinning platform with music blasting and flashing lights, and none of us could eat. So by the end of that game, we didn't even want to look at each other at that point.
Well, a couple of people seem to say actually that Isaiah was, saying quite a lot before just the Viking part. So, I mean, was there quite a lot said from him behind the scenes?
As far as I remember, and when I get into like traumatic situations, I think that my brain just like blocks it out. So I can't say verbatim what was said
Mm,
prior to the Viking comment. However, it felt very mean and nasty to me.
mm,
At that point, like Damien was already going home. He didn't need to hear yada, yada, yada. It just felt but we were all under pressure. So you never know how you're going to react in those situations until you're put in them. So I am trying to give Isaiah grace in that context. And I had chatted with him multiple times
yeah.
before. We were in the same cohort at the hotel. We actually rode from the airport to the hotel together. So overall, I was sticking up for Damien. I was also trying to help because Claire was very upset about the comments. And ultimately, it showed a lot more of Isaiah that I was starting to see sprinkled out in the beginning, but
Mm,
that was the moment where I was like, oh, shoot. And he was like our bodyguard in that situation. He was like our security. He opened the doors, he shut the doors, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. However, Claire was the one that was doing our numbers.
mm,
So she was doing all the math behind everything, which I knew I couldn't do. And when she's upset with our security, it's like, oh shit, this might end really bad for all of us. So later on, you see like a short clip of me saying, we're all going to get eliminated. And I'm like
yeah.
screaming. But mentally, once you break and you can't focus on like the task at hand, like we have to get to this door, we have to figure out the number of people that are going prior. That's when it started to hit the fan. So
Wow.
I think that that comment by Isaiah ultimately like blew us up.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was mean what he said, and I said
Yeah.
it, but there was a lot
So
going
it was
on.
quite. It was quite. So there's a real reaction then towards what he said. It wasn't just for show or TV or overly edited at all. It was real. Yeah.
Oh no. Yeah. Every time that I cried, it was for someone else also, like not necessarily for myself.
I did feel that actually. Yeah, I did. I did seem like you were quite emotionally supportive for everyone. Like, I feel like you're everyone's backup in the show. Yeah,
Yeah, and that's how I make myself feel better is by helping other people. And truly, the entire time, I wanted people to lean on me because that's how I end up helping myself. So,
yeah,
overall, learning experience, but the tears were real. I wish I could have faked them. I wish they were fake so I could come back with that because I cried the entire time, but they were real.
yeah. No, of course. I mean, and it was only fair as well. Like you said, he was almost like your bodyguard. He was trying to get everyone in the doors, weren't he? That's what we were talking about in the podcast before. That he was like just trying to get everyone in place. Yeah. So
Yeah, and it's hard because everyone had a piece in that game, right? You needed every single person that was in that room to make the number. So there were some rounds that weren't involved. There was actually a moment where Natalie was in our room, and I think that that kind of like jacked us up a little bit because Isaiah and Natalie were arguing. I didn't like Natalie because Isaiah didn't like Natalie, so it was just a whole clusterfuck at the end of the day.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, of course.
But overall, crazy game. Now looking back, it was fun. I think that it taught me a lot about myself and other people, and it was a monumental moment in the game for me.
Yeah, no, of course. While we're on the page of like talking about people's personalities and emotions, what personality type seems to last the longest though? Before eliminations, would you say?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think that there's so many times in the game and you don't know when it's going to happen, but at some point it's physical. At some point you do have to be kind of a loudmouth and speak up. At some
Mm,
points it's better to be quiet. So I do think that flying under the radar but still being moderately social is very important. And having your little alliance is important, but not just sticking with them. You have to go and you have to socialize with other groups so that you are involved with them. And if at some point you need them, they have your back. So I would say like a moderately social personality is good. And also being funny. They didn't really show a lot of the funny moments that the cast
what
had between each
personality?
other.
Sorry, I think the internet lagged a little bit there. What
Oh,
personality?
sorry.
No, you're right.
I think that just being moderately social, having a personality
Hmm.
of you are, happy but cautious and social and not too social, not too loud, but
Yeah.
also there's so much psychology behind getting people to trust you. And I think, within real estate and marketing and all of that, that's where I learned. So having the psychology behind making relationships and building them is important, but
Mm.
man, let me tell you, 098, he was loud and he lasted a real long time. So it's hard to say.
Yeah. No. No, it is. While we're on the page about other players as well, was there a player's behaviour that shocked or disappointed you the most? I know we mentioned a bit about Isaiah speaking a lot, but yeah, was there anyone else? Um,
Yeah, I made it a point to stick with people that were similar in ways to me, but also different. And I think that people's backstories, you have to take that into account because you don't really know how they were raised or what they have been through. So you don't really know how they're going to react in crazy situations.
mm,
But I knew that Isaiah was a strong player because he was pretty good at getting people to trust him. I trusted him for a really long time, but it goes so far back even to the cake situation and the Russian nesting doll. So Isaiah definitely surprised me. And I think that now there's this narrative where, we went into the boiler room and we eliminated him based on something that he said, but truly it was his actions throughout the whole entire process. So he might say like he didn't see it coming or whatever. And I don't know what was said in that conversation between him, Claire, and Kate. But ultimately, I trusted Claire at that point, and it seemed like, based on my observations, it was something that Isaiah would have said. So, eliminating a friend that you've had since the beginning is incredibly hard.
Yeah.
However, it needed to happen. It was him or me at that point.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I like the way you put that actually. Yeah. So it's good. Yeah. So did you feel safe during the slide challenge? Because that's how far you got up to, isn't it? Yeah. It was quite a far point as well, to be fair, after Mingle. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that there were a lot of games that looked very innocent going into them, and Slides and Ladders was one of them.
Mm.
Trinity and I, at that point, they didn't really show a lot of it, but we were so close. And we had our little kikis in the corner. We slept next to each other. We laughed so much, and we knew that we were on the same page of being honest. And I knew he wasn't someone that was ever going to argue with me in a partnership. So we go in. Obviously, they pick us to be partners because they knew that we were friends. And then he gets switched out with Drake. And I liked Drake too, and he was hilarious. And they have similar personalities in the way of they're not going to argue with me, and we are very level-headed for the most part. And if it came down to it, we didn't know what game we were going to be playing, but I felt okay. And something like came over me, and I knew that Trinity was going to be okay. I didn't know why, but I knew he was going to be safe throughout that challenge. And at the end of the game, being alone, and I was very sick at that point. I don't think that was that's why I
Okay.
wasn't really shown towards the end. But I like started getting pink eye. I had influenza B. My asthma was acting up. So going up and down that board,
Wow.
I almost self-eliminated. I was like, I can't do this anymore. I had a fever. But the game was fun, and I didn't really hear a lot of drama that was going on between everyone, and I was alone, so I couldn't even ask Drake, like, hey, did you hear that? But it was a mild game for me. It was fun for me, and going out that way, I couldn't have asked for a better elimination, truly. Like, it was
Yeah.
epic. It was in the middle of the board, and nobody betrayed me. So going out on chance, I think a lot of people would have a hard time swallowing that, but for me, I would rather it be that way than somebody
Yeah.
doing something nasty to me and
Yeah. Yeah.
betraying me in the end.
To be fair, a lot of people did look quite emotional and drained on the show. Like you can kind of see it that people were so tired by that point, just naturally as well.
A
Yeah.
lot of the games too took majority of the day. So you go through the day and you get pulled sometimes to like have a snack, but a lot of the times too what you don't see is that between challenges we can't talk to each other. So they
Yeah.
call it on ice. And that is mentally very draining as well because you're looking at your friends, you're trying to figure out what the game is. It's like a huge mind game. So then when you finally get to the game, your adrenaline's kind of gone because you spent all of it in your head and you know you're going to play a game but you don't know what it is and then you have to wait. So a lot of people ended up getting sick. A lot of it was just kind of waiting around all day, not being able to talk to each other, and obviously lack of food. So overall, the looking of being drained is for real. Like we were exhausted by
Mm.
slides and ladders. So
Wow.
it's good that that is portrayed for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Did anyone have to quit early because of being sick? Like, did they eliminate themselves on purpose because they were unwell in the show or anything?
Yeah, I heard that someone did very early on,
Mm.
but I think they did a really good job of trying to, I want to word this correctly, but trying to tell us like there's $4.56 million on the line, like you should really stay. And if it was, I mean, we saw Deja, like she had a really bad injury and they pulled her out right at the end. So
Mm.
if the medics deemed that it was bad enough for somebody to leave, I'm sure that they did end up pulling them out. But yeah, if it wasn't that bad, and everyone takes sickness and handling it differently, but I was a big baby and I stayed, and they didn't
Yeah.
have to do any convincing for that. But there comes a point where it becomes very real. So it's hard to say. I think there was one person, I just don't know who.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Do you think her injury was real at the end in the finale? Because like they can fix shows very easily. Sometimes, like, do you think there were real injuries and falls? Yeah.
Yeah. So honestly, I have spoken to Deja a lot outside of the game, and she is one of my very close friends at this point. And she did have to get surgery. The injury
Wow.
was real. And, thinking about red light, green light from season one, even those players were complaining so bad about how it was freezing cold and they would had to stand there for hours. So even with just four people, they had to stand there for 15 minutes and it is cold in London at that time. So I don't doubt that she was standing there still for 15 minutes and then went to take off in a sprint and her
Wow.
Achilles just snapped. But yeah, I think that for the most part, I haven't heard very much of production pulling people and saying like, "Hey, you should do this, you should do
Mm,
this." I'm sure it happened. It didn't happen to me at all, which I was shocked about.
mm,
But I think for the most part, the injuries, the things that people said, how the friendships they built was real, uh, for the most part.
mm. Yeah, no, of course. And I feel like a lot of people questioned Trinity's ending as well when he sacrificed himself for everyone else. I think that people have a lot of questions for that, which is interesting. So,
Yeah, I keep telling him, I'm like, you have to go on live or make a video. I think he has determined that he's going to make a 10-minute long YouTube video and get that posted. But Trinity, the entire time, he has an incredible story, which they didn't really get to tell a lot of it, but he is very selfless and he is very protective over his friends. And, I can't say what he was thinking in that moment, but he also didn't know that Steven was a multimillionaire. So I think that he's also very empathetic. So listening to
mm,
everyone's stories and all of that got to him. And he is, a man of God. And I think that in that moment, he just knew that it
mm,
was his time to go out. And, it sucks because all of the decisions that people make, when you subject yourself to reality TV, you subject yourself to everyone's opinions and
yeah,
thoughts.
yeah,
So I knew that it was going to be controversial. He called me the day after and he said, Mackenzie, I don't know if I made the right decision, but it feels right. And if I had to go through that situation and I did anything differently, it would have not been me. So I think that it's hard for him now, watching it back and really having to sit through that. And he was very close. But he keeps saying he wouldn't do anything
mm.
differently. And I believe him.
Well, hopefully Perla gives him some money or something for that sacrifice.
I
That's what I
know
want to
our
know.
our orange, he was running around the whole time talking about orange juice and how much he loves. So Tropicana reached out to him. Hopefully they're going to start a little deal going on. But yeah, I
Oh
think
wow,
that sacrificing yourself that late in the game, I don't know that I would have been able to do that just because, you think about how many regrets you're going to have after. But he stood on it and he still does. And so
mm,
that just shows me that he made the right decision. But yeah, I do agree. He should have gotten some sort of
yeah,
compensation or something.
yeah. Maybe he got a secret payment behind closed doors or something by Squid Game to do that.
I'm gonna have to interrogate him a little bit and
Mm,
ask.
yeah, yeah. Um, yeah. What players' elimination hit you the hardest on a more personal level?
Ooh, gosh. So very early on, actually the first day, we hadn't even slept in the dorms yet. The twins, Blake and Bryce, they got squibbed right next to me during, that first when the other twins came in and had to choose the three people. Because during the counting challenge, they're twin brothers and the twin brothers that were counting, so
Mm,
they weren't like cheering or jumping around or anything. They were more so upset because those twins were going to be separated. We hadn't known that the other one was coming back in the dorm.
yeah.
So the fact that they were feeling empathy like that, and then they said to me, our grandma, like she's been tracking the days, like she's gonna know that we made it through the first challenge. We're so excited. And then pop, they get squibbed. And I'm like, no effing way that this just happened because they did express how they were empathetic for the twins being separated. So to me, I'm like, okay, these guys are cutthroat.
Yeah.
And that one hurt. And then in marbles, when I found out that Daryl went home, that one was a really hard pill to swallow because we were very close in there and he was very trustworthy. And I knew ultimately, like, he was either going to come back or he wasn't. And if he didn't,
Yeah.
I was going to be distraught. But then kind of Trinity, helped me and he let me lean on him a little bit more. But those were probably my two most difficult
Mm,
eliminations.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's very emotional, and it seems quite challenging to deal with everyone else's story or appearance or death on the show. So yeah, how did you keep your emotions in check, like during stressful moments?
Oh, geez. I mean, I cried a lot. Like every time something crazy happened, or one of my friends went home, or we found out we had to keep playing a game or anything, I was just emotionally like devastated. And although I was crying in my head, I'm thinking, like, just breathe. Like, we're going to be
Mm,
fine. You either get eliminated and you go home and you lose the money, or you don't. And you get to stick around with your friends and have a big sleepover, you know? So I think keeping my emotions in check was something I learned throughout the process. And I was not a crier prior to going on Squid Game. So I think it was just pulling everything out of me, and not only like my insecurities, but my strengths. And I was so proud of my friends and so proud of myself. But yeah, breathing was the biggest thing. I was like, I just need to take a deep breath here, hold it in, and
wow.
try to do some box breathing so that I don't crash the hell out.
Very good routine, actually. It must have felt horrible then when Drake ended up sacrificing himself for you. Going on about that,
Yeah.
actually.
Going into it, me and Drake, so actually, after we had done marbles, they take us into like a sequestered area,
Yeah.
and it was me, Trinity, Drake, and Greg. So we're all sitting in this room, and like we get to, have our little tin dinner in like this office room. And that's when I started kind of getting to know more about Greg and Trinity and Drake. So in the dorms, me and Drake, of course, were like friends, but we didn't really talk very much. I think there was like a day or two in between us meeting and then going through the challenge. But walking into slides and ladders, we were like, okay, what are we going to do to figure out who's going down the slide if we land on one?
Mm,
Because that was my biggest thing, is I didn't want to argue with anyone. So we ended up coming to the conclusion that if we rolled the dice and landed on the slide, that person was going to have to pick first.
okay.
So it's the thing with the twist card. Like, obviously, we're going to talk about that a little bit, but if it was something that involved us, it was going to be the person that landed on it, because it was like their fate in a way.
Mm,
So I'm glad that we talked about that before. But I absolutely, if Drake would have asked me to go down the slide first, I would have at that point for
okay.
sure. And it kind of shows me telling him to go down the left slide.
Mm, mm,
But Drake said that he wanted to first, because I
yeah.
did not want to be responsible for the demise of anyone. So
So, 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 could you make up your own rules as well? Then it seems like you can choose what to do at that point a little bit.
yeah, it is TV at the end of the day. So they do want you like deliberating. And if you do get into an argument with someone, I mean, we saw it, me and Isaiah and Mingle, they want to catch it on camera. So me and Drake are just not those people. We were actually laughing like a lot of the time.
Yeah.
But in terms of our own rules, it was hard because the twist cards, the way that they were worded, was very strange. So a lot of the teams, we would stop and we would say like, "Hey," even with the ladder one with Justin and Emily, me and Drake were like, "Can we go up the ladder? Like, is that an option?"
Mm,
And production steps in and says no. But I think it was confusing because the first people that had to go down slides was Steven and Kevin. And on that card, it specifically said like each of them has to go down a slide at the same time. So they didn't get to really pick who went down. But yeah, a lot of the times production would just step in and say like,
well,
maybe we can make this work if you make up your own rule. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. But like watching it though, some of the rules, seem quite unclear and confusing as well. Was it quite difficult for you to understand some of them as well?
Yes. I have severe ADHD. Like, I cannot focus for shit.
Okay.
So, before any of the games that we played, we would have somebody come in and explain safety, so how to play the game safely. And then we would have an adjudicator explain the rules to us prior. So we would hear the rules first, but there's always, I mean, we're playing for such a large sum of money
Mm,
that when we are doing something, we want to make sure that it's fair so we don't have to go back on it later. And they say, actually, that wasn't the rule. So I agree that it was very vague a lot of the time, but it's kind of hard to say. I think if we questioned it a lot, it would be similar to Mingle, where when we were
yeah.
like, okay, we're not effing doing this anymore, we need to move on. They would step in, but yeah, there wasn't really a lot of guidance for slides and ladders.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It seemed quite difficult the whole show. I think I would have needed someone to repeat it to me like 10 times to understand. It's like quite a lot.
I
Yeah.
know. Well, see, what's crazy, this is a little bit of the behind the scenes, but if you went into the show and they knew that you had ADD or like a learning disability of any kind, they had written rules that you could then read after they had explained them to the group.
Well, it must be quite overwhelming though, like for like to have ADHD in there as well. It must be quite a nice sort of challenge for you to handle as well in a way, because like you want to be able to see if you can process stuff like this somehow, if that makes sense. Yeah, see,
Yeah.
I'm on the right
And
page.
also, to be fair, I had never spoken to someone that was from the UK or Australia or anything. So you guys speak much faster than we do for the most
Okay.
part. So when they're reading the rules and they have an accent, I'm like trying to process it in my ADHD brain. But I think also the adrenaline, like your heart rate goes from 0 to 100, like so fast. So
Mm,
that was another piece of it. I was just kind of trying to figure out what to do, but I was flying by the seat of my pants. I'm just watching everyone else and I'm like, how are they doing it? And that's how I ended up learning. But yeah, the ADHD piece of it, when you can't sit still and there's not a lot to do, it's hard for sure.
yeah, yeah, that's crazy. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I could ask so many questions. I'd be like, because there were times when you were waiting as well. It's like, how did you manage to get through that? There's so many questions you could ask. It's like, yeah, um,
One time specifically, we were waiting to do pentathlon, and pentathlon was split into 2 days. So they would put us in a tent, and at some point, I think they couldn't keep people quiet. So they ended up putting noise canceling headphones and freaking blindfolds on us at one point so that we couldn't do like hand gestures
mm,
or anything like that. So I think for me, mentally, that was the most difficult piece because you can't see anything. You're getting your senses taken away from you. So after that, I think people started going a little crazy and we were like, hey, y'all, like we gotta at least take the blindfolds off. So after that, we would do like little games or like flick things at each other, like little napkins or stuff like that. But once they found out if you were trying to strategize with your team outside of the game, because everyone didn't get that opportunity, they would threaten to remove us from the game, eliminate us
yeah.
completely because it was unfair.
Well, that's deep.
Yeah,
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 that's a
it's
lot.
crazy.
Yeah. Did you enjoy your final edit? Like, was you hoping for more screen time?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, overall, I am happy with my final edit because it did truly show like the type of person that I am. I am very strategic. I did go very like deep with the psychology behind my decisions and stuff like that, but I was upset that they didn't show more of the friendships I had built.
Mm,
But overall, I think that everyone that was on the show could say, like, I wish that they showed this and that, but I'm happy that I got screen time at all. And, I had a van scene, so that was really cool to see. And some
mm.
of we called them MIVs, our little interviews that got put in. But
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
ultimately, I'm glad. I mean, they could switch you either way. They could make you the hero or the villain. So
Mm. Was there a lot
glad that.
more? No, sorry. Was there a lot more content in the interviews as well that they missed out?
Oh yeah, I ended up doing, they called it the processing room interview. It's where you're in your normal clothes and you're sitting there kind of telling your story why you're there. So I did one of those that was left out, and then I did like 6 or 7 hours of the one where there's like all the boiler room stuff in the back.
Yeah.
So a lot of that was left out also. But at the end of the day, I do think that it could have gone one way or the other. And I think I'm not a director, I'm not a producer, so I can't be the one
Mm.
to say if I was interesting or not. And they knew that I wasn't there for screen time, so it's all
Wow.
right.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously there was a lot of players. Everyone was really good at what they did. Well, some of them.
Yeah.
If you could, yeah, if you could swap minds with any contestant, who would you choose to be
Ooh.
and why?
Oh my gosh. I think honestly, it would be 098 Matt, because
Okay.
all of the decisions that he made, I was so confused. I couldn't get a read on him. I could get a read on everyone else for the most part,
Mm.
but specifically Matt, I'm like, what is this guy doing? Like, he's yelling. Does he even know that this is like affecting him? Does he know that the people around him are kind of weary of him? But he did make smart decisions throughout. So I think swapping brains with him would be interesting. And we've
Wow.
spoken since after the show and at the finale and everything. And he's a really good guy, but in there, I was an op for him. I wanted him to go home.
Okay, okay. You're still in touch with some of the people then, which is good. Some of the
Yeah.
cast. Okay.
I
Wow.
always say I'm like I didn't win the money, but I won incredible friendships, and truly like
Wow.
no one knows what it was like in there other than the people that were there. So it's really
Mm,
cool to get back in touch and see everyone how they live their life
yeah,
outside of the trenches.
exactly. Yeah. What would you have done with the money if you did win it? Um,
Oh goodness. Yeah, I'm a real estate agent. I'm really big into investing and, the longevity. I want to build generational wealth. My parents were teen parents. They were not together. My dad passed away and
oh,
my
sorry to
mom
hear.
kind of reset. No, thank you. But it made me strong, everything that I've been through my life. But, my mom ended up kind of getting remarried. I have a sister now and then twin siblings also.
Oh wow.
And in the NICU, there were triplet babies there, and they were born already addicted to drugs. And there's a huge drug epidemic in Michigan. So, and it's probably everywhere, but I wanted to provide resources for children that are exposed to that stuff very early on
Mm,
because the statistics of you falling into drugs later in life and not being successful are significantly higher if you have a parent that is a drug addict. So that was my biggest thing was just figuring out a way to provide resources that don't cost money and that are, readily available for the children that grow up that way to have access to that
wow.
stuff.
Wow.
So, yeah, it was crazy. It was super deep. And I'm like, I know we have enough sob stories, but I understood where people were coming from when they were like, okay, this person's story like isn't good enough. They wouldn't use the money in the right way, but you also like don't know what people have been exposed to and what they have been through. So, I mean, that girl that said she wanted to go on a yacht, she very well could have worked literally her entire life and not been able to hang out with her friends and wanted to just take that time to go out
Mm,
on a yacht. So, I try to not be judgmental and say like my problems are worse than other people's because everyone at the end of the day thinks that their problems are like
yeah.
ending,
Did
end
it
all
get
be
a bit
all.
like?
So
Sorry. Did it get a bit like that in the show then? Like everyone was sort of, everyone's stories were a bit. Yeah. Was there quite a lot of competition talking about that?
yeah, I think the biggest thing that I neglected to realize in the show was that a lot of people lied about their stories. So they would
Wow.
say like something, super traumatic or super bad and what they would use the money for, but it had actually never happened. So that was
Wow.
something that was insane, but also like you hear people's stories and if you have a victim mentality, you think that your life is the worst and that you have the best story and that you deserve it more than anybody else. But when you've been through a lot of things, you take it one way or the other. It's either character building and you become better from it or you become a victim. So
Mm.
my thought process throughout was like my problems are like everyone's problems are on an equal level, in my opinion, because that's the worst thing that they have been through. And who am I to
Yeah.
say that my issues are worse than someone else's?
Yeah. 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 It's good to keep it level actually. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's nice. Good opinion. Yeah. Wow. It's almost like they, choose the stories in the application. Do you know what I mean? It's almost like that's what they're choosing for who to win. I don't know if that's what they're reading the most before the whole game even started. Yeah.
It's so hard to say because with every reality TV show, there is an extensive application process for the most part, and it's a puzzle. So they have to find pieces to the puzzle. And if you don't get selected and you do have a crazy sob story, that doesn't mean that it's not good for TV. It's just not the piece that they need for that show.
Mm.
So I did hear stories and I was like, oh my gosh, for sure. Like, if production wanted to take them to the end, then they could do that. But ultimately, I don't know if stuff was rigged. I have my theories, but I don't
I
think
want
that
to
it
know
was
what
based
yours
on
is.
anyone's
I,
stories.
I want to know your. I want to know what your theories are. It'd be interesting. I'm sure you have some.
I think that overall, it's crazy because they have to have some sort of control over that amount of people, right? So when even with the counting situation, they did ask people like, "Oh, we have too many people on this side. Do you want to switch over to the X side? Yada, yada. And when you're thinking about it from like a logical standpoint, like we don't know how accurate we were in the counting. We don't know how accurate they were. So a lot of it was they wouldn't squib us in the white room was the biggest thing. We were like, we're in the white room. This is a team building room. There is no way that we are going to all get annihilated in here because then there's going to be black ink everywhere and it's going to ruin the white room.
Mm.
So that was like our thought process throughout it. But also coming from, I went to school to be a police officer. So I'm very like detective. I'm trying to figure out all the behind the scenes and what's going on. And at
Okay.
the end of the day, if it was rigged, like there was nothing that anyone could have done about it ultimately, you know?
Mm.
So I tried to stop doing that throughout because you never know. And that was my, first reality TV show. So it was
Mm.
just figuring out the behind the scenes and the on the scenes is crazy.
Yeah, yeah. No, of course. Well, Mackenzie, I feel like you covered everything. It was a really good chat, actually. I'm not sure if there was anything else you wanted to share, that hasn't been shared.
No, I think for the most part, my biggest thing was just trying to explain the Isaiah piece, and I think we got that good.
Yeah,
'Cause
yeah, yeah,
I was like, I'm not gonna try. I think it's just like a situation of him trying to justify a lot of his actions, but ultimately, it's all said and done. We can't go back and change anything. So
mm, mm.
I'm happy to be here, and thank you for giving me the
No, that's all
opportunity
right.
and the platform to be able to
Mm.
talk. I appreciate it.
No, it's good. I mean, like I was saying, I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people that didn't actually get along as well, behind the camera. So, yeah.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
I think that they wanted to show a lot of the partnerships going into the show, and the relationships that were formed outside prior to even applying to Squid Game. And it's very important. And that is a very emotional thing, getting torn away from someone that you've known for your entire life. So
Yeah.
I understand that 100%.
Wow. Amazing. Mackenzie, thank you so much for coming on. I appreciate it.
Oh my gosh, of course. It was awesome. Thank you for having me.
No worries.